ahead and start talking about the regular items since it's 5 o'clock?
Yeah.
So we don't get behind.
Let's do it.
I have a couple of things to tell you. The newspaper did not get the legal notices put in Sunday's paper for the rezonings and variances. So, yep, it's not Lorinda. So as a result, we can't hear any of those. So we have sent out letters to all of the adjacent property owners and the applicants saying it's been put off to the January meeting, January the 5th, because there is no guarantee that will be a second council meeting in
All the rezonings.
all the rezonings. The only rezoning we'll have on this agenda will be the ones that were tabled from the last meeting, which right now is only the one from the PUD on Haberton, because the ones up on Brown Road are all taken off the table until the health department gives us some information about what kind of septic systems will be allowed in a karst recharge area. So all of those are off the table until we hear back from the Department of Health in Little Rock. So we only have one rezoning. There was only one conditional use. We will have the variances that we can still have and the large scales and anything else other than that. But anything that has to have a public hearing cannot be because the notices weren't in the paper. Which has created a real stir, but...
Yeah.
So just to let you know, if anybody calls you and they're upset because it didn't get on, the letters went out today saying that it is all tabled to the January meeting. Okay. So it's going to make, I'm not trying to scare you off, but January meeting might get a little bit longer than what we anticipated because of all that.
We should get quarantined together December too.
Sure. Yeah, sure, why not? So if you get any calls, that's where we are on those. We will not hear the amendment to the Chapter 56 ordinance because it has to have a public hearing too. So that just takes care of all that stuff. The other item for discussion before we start the full session at 5:30 is the land use plan update for the area that's in Bethel Heights that brought into the city, because we need to incorporate those into the land use plan and the master street plan. As we talked about before, the master street plan is pretty straightforward because we already had all of the collectors and all that stuff on our master street plan that went through that area anyway. So really we're just talking about filling in those areas. And part of the question is, do we want to extend what the current zoning is? Austin, do we have the zoning map filled in too? Okay, so you can see how that area came in as we did the conversion from their zones to ours. Do we want to at least let the land use plan reflect what the zoning is now for those areas that are industrial or commercial, and then let the rest of it all be single family or low density until we have a chance to look at it a little bit more in depth? They got to get into the system because you got to have a land use plan to cover zoning and that kind of stuff. So that's my question. But we can't have a public hearing on it in December anyway, since we have no public hearing notices that were published. So, and I know Kevin wanted to spend a little bit more talking about it. If y'all want to look at it some more, I think last time we gave you the maps to take home with you. So if you've got any suggestions, if you'll get them back to us, or if you need another set, let us know and we'll do that. We'll try to set this for a public hearing in January, or maybe put it off until February if we can, because we got a lot going on in January, to just incorporate that into our land use plan. The master street plan, like I said, is easy. The streets are already on there. So, anybody have any questions? I know that's maybe clear as mud, but that's kind of those two items. Thoughts, or I know, Kevin, you want to share your thoughts about Wagon Wheel so everybody knows what we're talking about there?
I'm trying to get my bearings on it. The only concern I had on the wagon wheel piece is that wagon wheel's tricky because there's a lot of areas on it that are already commercial. There's a lot of areas that are residential, and I'm just going to transparently say, I mean, it probably wasn't effectively. I don't think it was effectively planned out at any given time on there, but I mean, it is what it is, and I think there are blocks of areas on the south side that are, especially in the midsection as far as Wagon Wheel at the corner of Silent Grove, going all the way down, I forget the next road. But all of that is very established residential. You also have on the top of Callahan Mountain, very established residential. The areas that are in question is the areas that are actually along Wagon Wheel that connect to it, even past where the new Dixieland will be coming in through and so forth on there. We've heard where there's been requests as far as sections of that to be made commercial. We've had one that actually we denied previously. I think if I remember correctly, on this land use plan, it was showing those to be commercial areas. And I'm not in favor of that. I think that it still should remain residential. Again, the developers, the property owners are going to dictate what goes there, but from a master land use piece, I think as far as both on the south and north side, those sections that are residential, especially when you have residential on top of Callahan Mountain and then south of Wagon Wheel, I think those sections, it would be in the best interest to make those continue to remain residential. Because who's to say that there couldn't be a large development that comes in as far as subdivision? And, you know, some people would argue as far as the terrain, that makes it very difficult. I'd argue that there's several examples where you've had subdivisions that have built as far as up on the side of a mountain, as far as that whole piece there. So, and I just think it would be, at this point in time, an inconsistency in that whole piece. I'm completely in favor as far as commercial areas, and I actually like where a lot of the commercial has gone into play on Wagon Wheel. But let's remain some consistency. That's just my only request on it, so.
Anybody else got any comments?
Well, I mean, based on what I know about the history, a lot of the commercial that's gone in on Wagon Wheel went in when it was in the county. And so we sort of inherited what's there, and it wasn't really planned.
No.
I do like reserving the area that you discussed for residential that maybe is off of Wagon Wheel, but I think right on the frontage of Wagon Wheel, we ought to consider what it's going to be in the future so that people can manage their expectations. I'd hate to see a subdivision go in and then some heavy commercial go right in front of it and the land use plan not show that. So I'm in favor of reserving some areas for residential, but I think we ought to look at that area and decide what we think really is going to be commercial soon and what's not. If we don't give them some guidance, then they'll be surprised when the land use plan does not match what really happens.
We're already, Dixieland's already, the proposed Dixieland is already commercial.
Mm-hmm.
So taking it down to Wagon Wheel, I would say that portion.
Yeah, I agree as far as those that are on that would be on that Dixieland corridor, you know, especially with that the council overturned us on as far as that 92 acres on that whole piece. That makes sense, but there are other areas along Wagon Wheel specifically that again, it's up to the property owners as far as if we had recommended as far as being residential. I mean, right now, there's a lot of it that's just A1 in that whole piece, and
But we got two different issues going on here. We've got plugging in what was in Bethel Heights into the land use plan, and the need to look at Wagon Wheel as a whole. Okay, so there's really two different issues. My first goal is trying to get Bethel Heights plugged in so they're covered with a land use plan. And if we need to, and next year would be the year that we look at, no, Master Street Plans next year. But it's been such a strange year, we're going to have to blend them both into the same thing. And we can go back and look at the entire area of Wagon Wheel as a whole, but we need to plug Bethel Heights into it, one way or the other, to get that covered as far as zoning is concerned. So, you know, my first concern is trying to get them updated into the land use plan. And then we can go back and do the full look at everything. And that's kind of why I was looking at the areas that are commercial along 71. I think those are going to stay commercial. The areas along the railroad track that are industrial or commercial are probably going to stay industrial or commercial. And then we could do some medium density between those to create that buffer between the two, and then leave the rest of it, even if it's just medium density residential for the time being, until we have a chance to look at the land use plan as a whole. Now that the half-cent sales tax passed and we're looking at moving forward with the 412 bypass, at least to 71 and maybe further, I think that kind of changes some of that dynamics, because I think we're going to see that built in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's something we've had on there, but it really hasn't been a factor for a while. So two different factions that we need to take care of. So I will come back with a proposal to amend the master or the land use plan just to incorporate Bethel Heights in it. As simply as we can do that, just to get it in there. And then we can start next year going through the whole process of reviewing the land use plan like we should have done this year, but since everything got shut down, we didn't get anything done this year. So does that make sense?
Oh, I think so, but, you know, I think when you take in a whole city like that, it sort of triggers the need to look at the land use plan ahead of schedule.
It
You know,
does.
if things stay the way they were, yeah, we should wait a year, but we really need to jump on that next year, too.
Right, right. I think we need to, even though it's not the year we're supposed to do that, I think it really needs to be done because we didn't get it done this year and we have that other factor. But just to make sure somebody doesn't test the zoning because it's not on the land use plan, I think we need to get that in right after the first of the year if we can. So
I agree.
if you guys are good with that, that's kind of how we'll move forward with that.
I'm good.
Okay. You got other ideas, other comment? We'll put together a drawing and get it to you as soon as we can get a drawing done. We're not as good at getting drawing done. as we
I'm
used
good
to
with
be.
that, as long as it's for just the annexed areas, but from Bethel, the Bethel Heights
Right.
piece. But, I mean, that could be up for interpretation as far as the latest annexed area as far as Bethel Heights, because the reality is, all of that was Bethel Heights.
Yeah, but some of it has come out earlier than others, yeah, I know. And the island annexations are supposed to go through this coming council meeting, and that's that little white area that's on County Line Road, and there's a couple of other little pockets that are being closed in. Now, I just got some information, there's a couple more pockets we need to take, but they're not going to be in those. So that'll take care of those areas too, so we can fill all that stuff in. Okay? Other issues that we want to talk about before we get into the form-based code? We got a few minutes before everybody's expected to be here. No, yes, no, no. You may have seen we have new large-scale development application forms. We have new formal plats or plats, informal plats, new application forms that you're going to see. One of the things that we've tried to key in is knowing that the owner and the developer, if it's not the same person, and the engineer or surveyor are all on the same page, so everybody has to sign. So we know everybody knows it's the same information is coming from everybody, because sometimes we get caught in the middle between the owner and the developer, and we're trying to make sure they're all on that same page. We're trying to simplify the process and putting more information on the city's website and our social media. You'll see pictures of things that are actually being constructed. As you've looked at them at the table, you're going to see how they're progressing. We've got a lot of people that are following us. Can I use the term lot, guys? We have a lot? Okay. Trying to let people know that the things that we look at this meeting and the council looks at actually does mean something. It does get projects done, and so you can see what's going on. If it's not your side of town, maybe not everybody sees everything that's going on as far as that's concerned. I don't have anything else unless you guys have something else that we want to talk about before the next session starts at 5:30.
Are you guys still working on a potential fee structure for, forgive me, as far as that one,
Oh, zoning verifications. Well, not at the top of our list of things to do, but it's on the list. I mean, it's something, it seems to kind of slow down, unless I'm not seeing them. We haven't seen any in a month or so. Okay. I'm not getting as many, but sometimes it takes a lot of time. If they just want to know us to verify what the zoning is, that's easy, but they want everything that's happened with it, and sometimes it takes quite a bit of time in order to do that, so. You guys got anything you want to add to that? Okay. And we haven't looked at the whole fee structure yet either, because that's usually a hard subject to discuss when it gets to the council table, so I'm not ready to bring that up yet, so we'll see. You want to talk a little bit about it? You're better at it than I am because you've done most of the work. Have you turned all the buttons on?
They're all on. No,
This mic, guys.
that mic's not working. Probably because it's not plugged in. I don't know, so.
All of these buttons
They're all
are turned
pushed.
on.
Is it plugged in?
I don't think it's plugged in.
Oh, I think the cord's right here.
I think we had that trouble. Plugs in at the bottom under the,
There you go. That probably did it.
now it's plugged in.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So we're working on some of the applications in order to ensure that everyone is on the same page as they're applying for everything. I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. Basically, sometimes there can be some disconnects between all of the folks involved, us, engineers or surveyors, and then the clients. So the way that we're rewriting and kind of creating a flow chart, so to speak, as the first page of our applications, it's going to force folks to understand that this is the step-by-step process. I mean, if you have questions, please reach out to your surveyor or your engineer. Once they get things applied for through us, we've got 10 business days to get back to them, and I'm just using informal plats as my example. So hopefully that will better streamline and basically make everybody's lives a little bit easier, because the applicant is likely going to be a representative for an engineering firm, but the property owner is going to have to sign off on this, meaning they will have had to read everything, and that'll, like I said, streamline everything and keep things going. And we spoke with Ernest about this, and so really what we're going to do is have everything ready by the end of this month, and starting the 1st of January, those are the applications that we will accept, nothing else, because right now we get a lot of stuff that has Springdale logos from 15 years ago and things like that, and it can be hard for all of us to keep everything in line. So.
And we have a new position, a new planning technician that we're going to train her to go through the applications we get them and make sure they're complete, and they don't get to you guys until we have a complete application. Now, you may hear some pushback because things are going to not move forward as fast as they want to, but once you get a complete application, we'll put it on the agenda, so.
Well, and I think that's written into the law, isn't it, that you have so many days to act on a complete application. So if you deem it incomplete, that clock doesn't start.
Correct. And now we will have a mechanism that everybody knows on the front end. This is what it takes to make a complete application. Meaning when you get a large scale submitted, it's got to have a lighting plan. It's got to have a landscape plan. It's got to have colored elevations, or it doesn't get put on the agenda. And so that kind of helps us with that time frame, and everybody gets to know what the time frame is, and we move forward like that. Yeah. Hey, Ernest.
Hello, Ernest.
You want to sit up here? Well, that's rude.
Smart
That's
man.
rude. Yes.
Hello,
and
Daniel.
Well, I have a question. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Peyton.
Hey, will the application process be the same for administrative, non-large scale projects?
It takes the same submission of paperwork and stuff. It just doesn't have to go to this, through the formal process. We can review it at the staff level. And then if it has to go to planning commission, then they're set to do that. But yes, it's the same kind of information. Time review can be a little faster.
Well, since we have a few minutes, this is completely out of left field, but I noticed there was an airport hangar on the agenda that was then pulled off the agenda. In my experience at Bentonville, we wrote separate commercial design standards for the airport, recognizing that hangars typically are large metal buildings. And then we did some things to offset it with landscaping and that were appropriate for the airport. And I think that, not that we need more work to do, but that is something, if we're going to start building hangars out there, rather than waiving all of our requirements every time, we probably ought to consider writing some design standards that are applicable to that particular use.
Well, we are getting some revised elevations and landscaping plans to go with it, which I think we can come up with a compromise on this. I don't know that they have planned to build a whole lot more, but you're right. We need to address those differently, and coming in and asking for blanket waivers of everything is not going to work.
No, and I understand why it happens. When you use FAA funds, it's supposed to be as economical as possible. And so there are a lot of things that we require that the FAA doesn't think are necessary for hangars. That's why we created our own commercial design standards. And so, I wrote that one, so I think it's a pretty good jumping off point.
Okay, so we got some inside information. Well, the one proposed now is not being built with FAA money.
Right, I think that was local, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, but it's something that if that's really going to be the way we go, you're right, something needs to change. Other topics before 5:30? Now's your chance. You need the staff to do something, now's your chance to say so. We're assuming we're down into the slow time, right, guys? Hadn't kicked in yet, but it's part of the we think's going to happen. So.
When does your new position start?
She started last Monday.
Okay.
So we threw her in the middle of looking for some stuff from the Bethel Heights stuff that we needed to verify, and so she got to do the letters of saying everything's been tabled to January. So. She's doing okay, though.
Peyton, were you on earlier when we were talking about all the items that have to be pushed to January?
No, I didn't hear that part.
You want to cover that again?
The public hearing notices that were sent to be published in the newspaper on Sunday was not published by the newspaper. You can't have a public hearing unless you have a notice published in a newspaper of general circulation 15 days before the meeting. And so all of those have been tabled to the January meeting. So the only rezonings we will have on the December agenda is those that were tabled from the
previous month,
except for those that are on Brown Road, and all of those have been withdrawn until we hear back from the Department of Health on the septic system requirements in the karst recharge area. So we will have one rezoning on December 1st, or whatever day it is, December Planning Commission meeting.
Okay, okay, that's good to know. I did have, I don't know what we can talk about with that one or what we shouldn't, but so the rezoning is tabled. Is the construction ceased? Has that stopped, or is that continuing?
Well, as long as it's zoned A1, they have 200 foot of frontage on a public street and 2 acres, they can put single-family homes on it, and there's nothing to stop that. And they can get a single septic tank approval from the health department. So when you start subdividing it, is when those regulations kick in. So what is going on already permitted now can go forward. No preliminary plat or any other construction. Then subdivision can go forward until we have information from the health department.
So the health department has approved the current construction that was taking place?
It is my understanding that the health department approved a septic system for the existing structure that was moved in and is being remodeled, yes.
Okay. I'm getting questions and I'm, you know,
I know, we're all getting lots of questions, but
I
that's,
know probably everybody else is, so.
but we informed them that they would have to have approval from the engineering department at the Arkansas Department of Health that shows septic system locations in conjunction with where structures are going to be placed and the lot sizes before any of that could move forward. And
So what does the karst study, what impact does it have, if any, on the Department of Health approval?
Well,
Do they look at that?
the recommendations in the karst study is that there would be no subdividing of land in that area unless it is on an approved sewer system. So anything short of that has to be approved by the health department, because they're the only ones that issue permits for septic tanks or septic systems of any kind. So that's kind of where we are on that one. Ernest still here? Am I missing anything, Ernest? Nope. Okay.
And we don't have an anticipated date that they would bring that back up? It's just tabled kind of indefinitely now, or?
Well, actually, it's technically withdrawn. It has to be
Withdrawn.
resubmitted and started
Okay.
all over. And the only email I got saying is the health department, with it being holiday time, would probably not have it ready before the end of the year.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nope. Don't see Tom, and
And we didn't hear from Roy, did we?
I have to see who you are. You were hiding. Yeah. Is Tom coming too?
Tom was not feeling well, so he said, I'm gonna
Okay,
try and be careful. So
Okay.
I just talked to him, he wanted to be here.
okay.
Do we
Something
have
going
a copy of this document we're about to look at?
Well, we handed out copies here. Can you quickly somebody email one to Peyton?
I get one?
I didn't know. I got John's email back, Rick's email back on 10/20, but I don't think that's in here, so.
Can you send it from your phone?
There's a lot of stuff attached to that one.
Rick had them. Rick had them in his hand. Did he hand out all of those form-based code things? Okay.
I can take a picture of my phone and scan it pretty fast. I mean, unless somebody has access.
Is that what,
to it.
Austin, is that what Rick went up to do he's gonna email you one?
Okay,
Okay.
fine. I was gonna say, we don't need to go take pictures of it. I could pick one up tomorrow, but yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Okay, so if we're ready to start the next
Yep.
session, then Austin, this is Austin gonna do this.
All right.
All right. So many of you have been privy to some past conversations on this, but the overall purpose of tonight's meeting will be to let some of our stakeholders make some comment on this and just kind of have an open discussion. So I'm going to try to keep it to a minimum and just hit the high points on this and go over some of the materials that we've assembled, and then we'll kind of open the floor for some others to maybe come up and speak about their experiences developing in the existing form-based code, et cetera. So we are proposing the adoption of 2 option-based, form-based overlay districts. To the south, you have the Powell Street overlay, which is on the top here. And then to the north, we have the Mill Street overlay. Both are loosely following the path of the Greenway. So, yeah. We have some more comprehensive reports that we put together on housing, demographics, things like that. We won't get into that tonight. Maybe we'll have a chance later to talk about some of those things. But these are available, and we'll make sure and send this out at a later date for everyone to look over at their own time. So as we began the conversation of what we were really setting out to achieve in these areas, one of the first things that came up was missing middle housing. And I think this is a good illustration here that kind of demonstrates that. We are most familiar with single-family housing, and in our case, and this graphic shows a mid-rise, but we're most familiar with garden apartments and sometimes side-by-side duplexes, and those are the building types or the housing types that we're most familiar with. So one of the things we wanted to focus on was creating the possibility for more of these options to be utilized in this area and meet the need for missing middle housing, affordability, et cetera. So we wanted to take a look at how these things could be, I guess, applied in specific areas. So we've made some models to demonstrate some of those. This one is based on the intersection of Ewalt and Dodson Street. So what we've done is just to basically create a model based on the lot sizes, typical lot size. In this case, most of these lots are about 50 in width by 125 in depth. So relatively narrow, deep lots, which don't tend to lend themselves well to, I guess, your typical front load type single-family construction. But as you can see in this, it may be kind of difficult to see it from your seat here, but we actually have a multitude of different housing types shown within this one neighborhood, everything from stacked duplexes to a fourplex, single-family dwellings, a shotgun duplex, as well as some carriage houses and ADUs, all within the same neighborhood. And you can see on the bottom left here, we actually have a more conventional front-loaded single-family dwelling. And I leave this in here to show that these things can integrate well into an existing neighborhood despite a multitude of different types of design within the same neighborhood. But ultimately, all of this to achieve a more pedestrian feel that aligns with our vision for the Downtown Springdale Master Plan and seeks to unify these areas into our vision moving forward. So here you can see a fourplex, perhaps in this case we're at the corner, the intersection of where a neighborhood center type 2 area is meeting a more residential area. But relatively speaking, we have a similar size structure. So we're achieving density, but we're still staying with the character of the neighborhood. And that is one of the things that we've really been focused on in discussing these things. Here I'm showing one of the lots within this model. You can see there's a 30-foot front setback, 2 8-foot side setbacks. This is based on pretty much any residential zoning in our traditional zoning. So you can see based on this that the buildable envelope is relatively small, and specifically with these size lots in these older neighborhoods, it does not tend to lend itself well to this type of design. But on the right, I have an example of, I guess what we'd say is probably a neighborhood residential type 3. In this case, it's almost kind of a common sense approach to the placement of the facade. We're just basing this on the historical context of the area. Where are the other facades in the neighborhood placed? And we're basing it on that, and we're referring back to the historical plat, if existing, to analyze that further. So when people make application for these, we will be referencing back and ensuring that this is keeping with the historical nature of the subdivision and sticking with that character. So moving on, just have some examples just to show the overall feel that can be achieved by pulling these closer in and creating more of a pedestrian-friendly feel on the street. Moving over to some more commercial examples. This is actually in the existing downtown four-base code, but it's a really good example of what you get when you have a triple frontage lot. You can see with the 30-foot front setback we have here, the buildable envelope is reduced substantially, and ultimately, you know, this might be something that can be built on, but it's going to force all of the parking to be front-loaded. So With that said, moving on, a neighborhood center type 2 designation here, you can see the difference of the possibilities that are created when you're allowed to bring this closer with a Bill 2 line. I think this is about 15 feet from the right-of-way as opposed to a 30-foot setback. And you can see the difference that this creates and the way it addresses the street. This is another subject property. This one is in the Powell Street overlay at the corner of James and Powell Street. Once again, you can see the possibilities that we have by applying this and offering the option for developers and property owners to utilize some of these. In this case, this is actually a mixed use as well, so you see kind of a live-work situation in the major building, and then some of the units out on the ancillary are more residential in nature. But currently, outside of a PUD zoning, this is not something that we would be able to utilize, and the minimum acreage for a PUD in the city right now, as it sits, is 10 acres. So you can see that in terms of creating quality infill development in some of these areas, this is a really key component to be able to promote that, and also to be able to utilize mixed use in these areas that are smaller acreage. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to some of our stakeholders who may want to make comment about some of their experiences, and thank you.
We'll have question and answer part later, right? Who wants to be first?
I'll go. My name is Ken Hall. Tom Lundstrom and I have been working on some projects downtown. I'll say a couple things about the existing form-based code. I didn't know what it was when we started working on some stuff down here, and now we love it. It has allowed us to take properties and houses that otherwise we couldn't do anything because of the flexibility and the ability to, to create some density that wasn't there before. We're able to do some stuff down here that we simply could not have done before the form-based code. It took a while to get used to the actual code, but now that we're sort of acclimating ourselves to it and working with planning department, it's getting easier and easier to sort of take a look at a site and within a relatively short period of time know what we can do with it, which is extremely valuable. In this market, things are moving pretty fast, and to be able to know what to do, on a relatively quick basis is helpful. So we really like it. We're working on, we built a couple things under form-based code. We're working on a couple of other ones, and so like it. With respect to the optional overlay, there have been 2 or 3 projects that we have sat down with planning and said, we would like to do this here, and we're unable to do it, and didn't buy that property, and it sat there in its present, still sitting there in its present state, because we simply couldn't make it work at all financially under the existing zoning. And so we are very much in favor of some sort of overlay option to get to in those areas in particular. We like that Mill Street area, and then south of the existing form-based code down to 412. We think that's awesome. So anyway, for what it's worth, we're very, very much in favor of extending the form-based code.
Anybody else got comments? Don't be shy.
I was going to say, Daniel, you're not
I can't
shy.
imagine you being shy.
Daniel Hintz. I worked on the downtown master plan and the form-based code process, and I'm also an investor in downtown Springdale as well. Just to remind the group that we went through the downtown master plan with over 1,000 touch points with the community. And the form-based code was one of the biggest tools that the city and the consultancy group H3 identified as a way to establish the vision that the community wanted. And so it was implemented in downtown for that very same reason, is that we saw that as a really important tool to implement the vision. I think the biggest thing about form-based code is, like, if people want it, why only limit it to a certain part of town? It's sort of like saying, from supply and demand, people love red sweaters, why do we just sell them blue sweaters instead, right? And so from a city perspective, it's saying if walkable downtowns or walkable communities, walkable neighborhoods, the form-based code is one of the most powerful tools that a city has to accomplish that. So to extend that opportunity to other areas, I think, is just good public policy. Now, I take off my urban planning hat and put on my investor and developer hat, and I will say that a form-based code allows us to maximize the opportunities in a downtown or in a space, and that infill, which is already very difficult, right? I mean, greenfield is one thing, but urban infill can be very challenging. What these rules do is they establish very quickly baseline rules that allows us to follow. It is neighborhood contextually relevant, which also helps not only us to ensure as developers that we're actually developing a good quality product that makes sense for the neighborhood, but it also protects our investment in the long term because we understand what could come down the pike. And that's, from an investor standpoint, that's one of our biggest X factors, is I may want to do the right thing, but who's to say our next door neighbor is going to do the exact same thing? And that's normally what happens with Euclidean zoning. So I think from a long-term perspective, the form-based code is solid public policy. It makes sense in the year 2020 and beyond from mature zoning, and it also protects investments in a way that Euclidean zoning doesn't. And so I think we're fully supportive of taking the form-based code and extending it to other areas of Springdale.
Daniel, do you see any gaps that we're not addressing?
I think we need to relook at parking and parking requirements. I understand that you've kind of said that parking requirements are not there for commercial, but I think we need to have a very similar and robust conversation about parking requirements for residential, particularly those larger pieces, those fourplexes, those sixplexes. There's a lot of opportunity to include parking on streets that are underparked right now, specifically throughout many of these neighborhoods, which allows for maximum development. And the other question is optional. You know, you can ask people to do the right thing, doesn't necessarily mean that they will. And so I'm also a strong proponent of turning this into law and turning this into public policy as much as possible. There's a consistency in that. Optional is great when you ask people to do it, but that doesn't guarantee quality, nor does it guarantee the type of projects that you want. So I'm also a big proponent of creating consistency in the law across every one of these neighborhoods to make sure that if a developer does one thing one place, that developers and property owners are held to the same standards in adjacent neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Philip, you're on.
Another shy one.
Thank you all. I'd like to just say I am certainly in favor of this project. The form-based code in the north and in the south sections. Are you looking at both of them now?
Yes.
Okay.
Two different overlay districts is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
At the same
So, like everything else, and I won't get into all the pretty pictures and all of that. I think it's all great, you know. And but like anything else, the devil's in the details. And something that I think is really important is that we know what the capacity of the sewer is in the area, so we're not in there digging up every time we turn around, digging up the streets. A lot of the sewer in these areas is in the street. You know, it would be good to make sure that we have the water and sewer department on board with any kind of replacement or expansion of the present system there. And another big issue in building and in developing is the runoff water. You know, there's a lot of areas here, we're talking about small lots. Are we going to be able to accommodate detention ponds? Are we going to need something like that? It might be kind of difficult if we're required to have engineer design a plot plan for a project. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying it could be difficult on these small lots. You know, because we're not starting with the bigger piece of property and handling all the drainage for the whole thing, like 5 acres or 10 acres. We're taking a quarter of an acre and trying to develop it. So it's a whole different set of problems to deal with these water runoff. Another thing that I might suggest, and I'm sure it might be something that could be looked at, and I've seen it in other urban areas like this, is small pocket parks. I know we're going to have a great park over here on Grove Street, and that's great to walk over there, but sometime whenever you might be a little ways away, and it might be good to have a small little park area for young kids to go out and run around and play. They're not going to have a whole lot of yard in their buildings, or if it's an apartment building, I don't know what the requirement may be for green space. It's not like I said again, you're dealing with a big piece of property and you just work it in. There might have to be some thought given to how we're going to deal with green space and little park area. And I'm not talking about a big park. I mean, it might be a quarter of an acre, or it might be 100 by 100. That's kind of basically my thoughts on that. We're really pleased with what we've been able to do, and the city has worked well with us. They're not exactly a pushover, but they're accommodating, and whenever they see there's something that maybe doesn't make sense, they're willing to be flexible on it. Another thing is the fire codes. You know, we're packing a lot of houses and apartments in small areas. Do our fire codes model to accommodate these type of structures and the close proximity to each other? So that's all I've got to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
One thing I did want to say is the aspect of smaller projects like this, when it takes on to sidewalk improvements, utility relocation, those type of things will also often kill a small project, a duplex, fourplex, because you just can't absorb that same level. And so the ability to work with the city, and we have, I mean, I'm not saying this from something that's occurred, I'm just saying moving forward, I think tying these development areas with your CIP and recognizing what could be done with advanced investment coupled with this public policy is a great 1-2 punch. But if you wait to do the improvements on the backs of some of these small developments, the small developers can't absorb those costs. And so it's just something to think about, which is very different than large scale. large scale understands that they need to absorb some of that infrastructure cost to follow up with Philip's comments, but a duplex or a fourplex just simply can't do it, especially now when construction costs are up almost 45% over what it used to be. And so that's going to have a significant impact on some of this missing middle development if that isn't aligned.
You guys got comments? No? Let Dad speak. Okay. Anybody else got any comments? This is your chance to tell us what you think. It's easy to put it on paper. It's harder to put it on paper with something that everybody can use that actually works.
I just want to speak to Philip's point a little bit about runoff. I think this might be a great opportunity for us to work with the engineering department to perhaps update the existing drainage manual to incorporate some more low-impact development and sustainable practices regarding smaller sites like this. So we will look into that. Yeah.
With us addressing master street plan this next year, how would we look at this different? Or would we?
Well, for one, I think that there are some streets that if they're not on there, I'm not gonna say have to, really should be considered to go on our street improvement master street plan. Mill Street, y'all, if you haven't been down it, is very not walkable friendly. I don't know if those words that came out eloquent, but that Mill Street is tough. It's narrow. The sidewalks are either non-existent or in disrepair. And, you know, I don't want to steal time from people who are here because y'all get to hear me talk all the time. But if we're going to implement something like this, I really second the statements of Mr. Hentz and Mr. Taldo, because I feel like you have to do it together. What we're trying to do is connect these neighborhoods to the amenities downtown. Not, you know, we want to encourage investment, but we want it to all be connected. And in order to do that, there are some streets downtown that are going to have to get some attention other than just Emma Avenue.
Yeah, I guess that's where I was going with part of my question is that do we need to look at these areas as a different perspective as far as master streets and trail plans? I don't know that we have.
Well, now, there's a difference between a capital improvement plan that
I
shows street
understand
work to
that.
be done and a master street plan that shows the classification of the street. The form-based code sets up.
But one can help influence the
True.
other.
The form-based code sets up a primary and secondary streets, which I think we probably need to look at establishing in these areas that we're adding on as potential overlay districts, because that's how you orient, and we haven't done that yet. But that's something that's going to have to be done as part of that. That then can lead to a capital improvement program to address some of those street issues. And to answer your question, Daniel, I know that the Water and Sewer Department is aware of the impact that this kind of development can have on downtown and what that does to their infrastructure, because a lot of that is old and it needs to be taken care of. And you see them out there doing work now. Are they doing everything that needs to be done? I mean, they've been working down Meadow Street. They've been working down Park Street. When we get into the new year and we start talking about updated land use plan, we need to get them in here and talk about their master plan and how it affects the rest of the city, and particularly the downtown area too. Something we would have done this year had we not had COVID shut us down in March, and we really didn't get anything done this year because we couldn't have those kind of meetings. But you're right, those are the kinds of things that we need to talk about. Yeah. I wasn't going to say much. I'm supposed to be sitting here taking notes. I'm not supposed to be talking.
Go ahead, Dana. Yep. Yeah, you'll have to come up to the mic so Peyton can hear you.
It's also the alignment with all utilities, not just because we're dealing with cable issues, we're dealing with a lot of things. And as a small developer, when we're trying to call these people and say, hey, we need something moved over, even if it's 5 feet, it just is a challenge. And so I think that the difference with small developers is that we're powerful as a group versus one big developer coming in and doing a 30-acre lot. And so the other recommendation is how do we start working together on some of this kind of stuff from a block by block basis? If you have a group of small developers, whether they already own their property and want a lot split and do something next to them, it's a great way to start building community wealth and that potential. But how do you start instilling that opportunity for folks that already are down here and not just rely on people from, coming outside to do the work? I think it's a both and conversation. And the more we're able to work together as small developers, we're not tripping over ourselves. We can negotiate things differently. We can work with utilities far more effectively. We work on it a block by block basis. And I know that's a lot of work, and I'm not putting that on the city. You have a great organization with the Downtown Springdale Alliance, the Chamber. I mean, I think that there's a enormous potential to tell the world that Springdale's open for business for these small developers by building a coalition of support for us, so we're not kind of out there on our own. And there's a lot of developers who are doing it for the first time, and that's also something I think could be incredible benefit in the city of Springdale, is to have systems to actually train up folks to do this and to do this right. I mean, we talk about the learning curve of form-based code. Learning as a small developer can be a very expensive endeavor, believe you and me, I know. So that's something else that I think would be incredibly powerful. What sort of training can be done around this form-based code so it's not just adopted and then said go? Is there actual trainings for community members? Are there actually people and workshops that, you have great city staff that are very, very talented in what they do. Is there an opportunity to actually walk people through and actually look at 2021 as a quarterly FBC, something or whatever, to kind of get people to understand what this means?
Hadn't really talked about training sessions, but we're all learning as we go through this. There's no doubt about that. So, yeah. Other comments, questions? The maps are on the wall, on the tables and other locations. I think we really want you to spend some time looking at that. We've outlined areas simply from a staff standpoint of what we thought would be good locations. That boundary is not set in stone yet. Keeping in mind we're not trying to expand this too big of an area to start with. And right now it's optional because that's the way we can handle it with moving forward right now. As we move forward, things may change, but I think right now that's the only way, unless Ernest has some other great ideas, of how we can kind of stretch this out a little bit more.
Got a couple of other comments. So it just occurred to me, as Daniel was talking about, one of the things, we do some opportunity zone deals down here. And in terms of creating an atmosphere that's conducive for, smaller projects, so to put it in perspective, we have 4 contiguous census tracts that are opportunity zones. The rest of Northwest Arkansas has 4. There is some discussion at the federal level of removing part of some opportunity zones that are around universities because they're sort of false low-income areas. And so there's some dynamics going on that are driving people to do opportunity zone deals, and maybe in Northwest Arkansas, particularly in Springdale. The other tax, sort of technique that's sitting out there to do tax deferral is 1031 exchanges. And those are becoming more and more difficult because the deals aren't out there. And so opportunity zone investing is becoming a primary tax planning tool for people with capital gain. And in Springdale, in really the core that we're talking about, where the form-based code is and where you're talking about doing an overlay, may be one of the best areas in this part of the country to do opportunity zone deals. But like the stuff Daniel talked about and Philip talked about, it's got to be a comprehensive package to get people, down here, to do those deals. But I think there's an incredible opportunity to be the opportunity zone investment area really in all of Arkansas. So, but I think it takes a comprehensive sort of approach to get that going more so than it already is.
And I think a lot of that's because most of us do not know what are the advantages and how do you work through an opportunity zone. We don't market it as well as we probably should.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm everybody knows me, I'm a tax lawyer and have worked on them a lot, and would be happy to provide, resources to people, educate people. We do it all the time. And so if there's something that the city could use for us to come in and provide a presentation, I would be more than, I've got PowerPoint presentations, be more than happy to do that for people.
If we do some kind of training, that may be one of the areas that we need to start with very soon to let people understand what that means
Yeah. No.
for this area and the form-based code as we're looking to extend it. Okay.
And I would love, even if it came in during a working meeting, to kind of hear and learn more about opportunity zones as well. And how we
be
can
happy
use
to.
that for planning the city.
Okay. And I've heard enough of it that I'm really dangerous. I do know that, but it's
It's
complicated.
not too hard.
Yeah, well, you're sitting on the other side of the table. I think it's very difficult, but yeah, okay. And I didn't realize that they were looking at trying to pull some of that area back. That puts us into a different,
And I don't want to be, scare people who have deals going.
Yeah.
If they do it, they'll grandfather existing
Yeah.
deals down in those areas. But what happened was there was sort of this false financial data from the census, because it's a census data-driven low-income areas. And they had, frankly, it's focused on university towns because of the low-income students, yet you've got these areas that are really wealthy that are developed. I mean, I don't know how I feel about it. I'm just
yeah, it's just something that's
suggesting that it may,
Yeah.
if that happens. By the way, the Biden administration is favorable with respect to opportunity zones. We don't see them going anywhere. But so I think that Springdale really can use that to its advantage for investors.
And that may be something we need to get with the Downtown Alliance, that they do some training on opportunity zones with other aspects of the community, not just the form-based code. So Pastor Jill was going to be here tonight, but she had a death in the family, so
Yeah,
we need to get that to her too as well.
Yeah, we've got 4 large census tracts.
Yeah.
So be happy to help.
It was good work on the part of the chamber and Senator Eads to get that big of an area established in downtown
Yeah, no,
Springdale.
it
really was.
It's great.
Anybody else? Kevin, you just walked in. You got any, we're taking comments from anybody about this form-based code option that we're talking about. If you've got comments you want to give, not to put you on the spot, but you just came in. Okay, so really, I guess, Philip, go ahead.
I already commented once.
Well, this is a back and forth discussion, because if you're like me, when you hear something, that makes me think of something else I need to ask or talk about.
One thing I wanted to kind of call to your attention, and I think it's something that we need to think about a little bit, is there's an area in North Little Rock, which North Little Rock was kind of, they were years ahead of us, but it's the Argenta area. I'm sure many of y'all have been over there. It's a one-street deal, kind of like Emma Avenue, and there's a lot of, not a lot, but a moderate amount of night activity and things like that, and it's becoming vibrant. And part of it looks a lot like our Emma Avenue does. And so I went down there and I thought, well, this is close as I can find to what maybe downtown Springdale could look like. So I went and I drove a block or two either side all the way around that downtown area, and what I found was hundreds and hundreds of apartment units. And I'll just tell you, if you want a vibrant downtown, you're going to have to be able to accommodate the people. And you might want to think about that, or what kind of codes or whatever, whenever it comes in, because it is going to come in if this is successful. And, building apartments aren't just for out west or out east where there's acres and acres of land, it's also for the downtown area. And I think it's going to have to develop, you know, eventually we'll need 1,000 units down in the area. And that might sound like a huge number, but if you want to have a really vibrant area in downtown, people need to live close by. And you're not going to do it all with single-family houses. So it's something that you might want to think about on the peripheral. I'm not saying put a big complex on M Avenue. I'm saying get out on the other side of Huntsville Street or on the other side of 265 in those areas there and think about that kind of development for those areas there.
I think that's one of the things why we think the form-based code gives us that opportunity to do that in those areas that now you got to go MF 24, or you got to go MF 12, but with the form-based code and the options that we have in there, it allows us to do that and have a little bit more control over it. And I think that's what we're looking for.
I was just amazed whenever I made that circle around this neat downtown area, and it was just apartments. And they weren't old apartments, renovated apartments. It was new apartment complexes. So,
But it's a mindset change that apartments are not bad. They're you know, we've kind of had a problem over the years because it's been something that's really been tough to do in Springdale if you want to do apartments. We've got to have a mindset change that not everybody wants a single-family home with a big yard. That's not, it's not going to be everywhere, so. Yeah.
I just thought that was something you might want to ponder a little bit at some point to help bolster the people population down
And the
here.
building types that are allowed in this, I think, at least give us a place to start with that.
Yeah.
And it may be the next round we have to do something a little bit different, but we're starting out with that in mind, so. Okay.
Thank you.
Other comments, other questions? Some of that, Philip, may have to be mixed use. It's not just all apartments, it's got some kind of commercial on the bottom floor too. If you see, I know there's some of those areas around Argenta that are the same way. Yeah,
And there's big office buildings.
yeah.
I mean, big office.
What might be helpful is if we take, because this is referencing the downtown form-based code that maybe not everybody on the commission has, but if we take the legend and add our ordinances, you know, behind that to this document might be helpful.
Well, we'll get to that. I mean, we've got to go through the process of putting all this together in a form, and Rick's getting ready to address how we get to that.
So for anybody that wants to have the form-based code readily available on their phones, you can just scan that QR code and have it in front of you right now. There's a table of contents that's pages, I believe, 2 and 3, and that'll help you better understand everything that's on the walls and in the packets that you guys have.
These guys have
There
that
you go.
technology thing that can do that.
That was ahead of me. That was my suggestion. I just didn't know if these colors would mean anything to several people. So that was you're already a step ahead of me.
I wanted to add 2 references that could be at play. The Incremental Development Alliance, they do special trainings all over the country. As a matter of fact, one of the faculty members, several of the faculty members of that live here in Northwest Arkansas. So that's a great resource. And then myself and several colleagues have been working on something called pattern zoning, which is a very powerful tool for setting the type of tone that you want, in which the city has architectural and full design sets in which you guys own. You set up various areas for where you want those types of buildings to be built, and then you can either sell them or create some sort of incentive. It's an optional package, but we've been able to do it now in several different communities, and the creators of that program are actually down in Fayetteville. So Matt Hoffman and Matthew Petty can be an incredible resource for you, and all they have to do is drive right up here. But they're doing this stuff all over the country, and I've had the great honor of working side by side with them in several of the communities, and it's an incredibly powerful tool. So since you are talking optional, to potentially look at that along with pattern zone, you might be able to jumpstart development far quicker because you're reducing the process, the fees, into the point of saving anywhere between $12,000 to $20,000 a door on some of your multifamily stuff because of the process. You skip over quite a bit of the planning commission and that kind of thing, and you guys can just say, yes, this is what we want in these areas. So it's just two resources I wanted to bring to your attention that could come to bear to jumpstart this a lot quicker.
Can you send me the links or some information on those? Okay.
I was going to say, it would, if you guys are okay with it, we can go ahead and open it up for just some open discussion.
At different places in the room,
Sure,
looking at
yeah.
the maps. There's pins there if you want to make
Yeah.
notes on them, if you want to make comments, so we know what you're thinking about, if we're leaving an area out or something different. We got to start with something, and that's what we put together as a place to start. Okay? I think this ends the formal part of the meeting. I think the rest of it is just looking at, talking about, and getting information to us. Okay?
That works. I want to appreciate you guys as far as, I know you put a lot of effort into this, and very appreciative. So, all right.
Thanks, guys.